Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Eden of LightCycleAstrology.com. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys had a great weekend and are doing well out there. It's Monday, so we're doing another Mantic Monday episode. And today I thought, it's been a while since I've done horoscopes for all 12 rising signs. And I have something really big to talk about. We had over the weekend Jupiter enter a new sign, enter the sign of Gemini, which is exciting. Of course, we always really like in astrology when these slower planets enter different signs because we get so used to them being in one place for so long, and it feels like a big shift. And this is definitely one of those astrology moments of 2024 that is a big deal. It stands out. So today I thought, I know you guys love when I do horoscope videos for your rising sign, of course, because it's rooting at something that is personal for you rather than me just talking about maybe some different angles of meaning that a planet doing something with another planet could be about. This is going to be us exploring Jupiter in the sign of Gemini, but also based on house topics that Jupiter may begin to be activating and for sure developing for you personally over the course of the next year as Jupiter travels through Gemini. What I mean by this is, if you guys watch the channel, I'm sure you know that I practice ancient astrology, or Western traditional Hellenistic astrology as it is sometimes referred to. And as far as we know, the ancient astrologers practicing astrology in the Western Hellenistic world were using whole sign houses. So this is making it really easy to not only explore what Jupiter and Gemini might represent, but from the standpoint of looking at Jupiter and Gemini in your birth chart, it also means that Jupiter enters a new whole sign house, which is going to begin to activate different topics or areas of life. Now, Jupiter is traditionally like a good planet that we all want to, see Jupiter making positive aspects to things in our chart, because it can tend to mean success or abundance or growth or something positive, like some kind of blessing that is going to be coming through for us where Jupiter transits. So that's also a positive thing, is that Jupiter entering a new house will also mean that that particular area of life that is relating to those house topics may begin to grow in some kind of positive way. There may be some kind of fruition of success there, or there may be that area of life that is having positive changes to it that are developing further in a really powerful, positive, deep way. So that's one thing that, of course, is something we want to take a look at, because this is a feature of 2024 that really shifts the dynamic of the year, and in a positive way. Now, in a moment, I'm going to make sure that everybody understands what I mean by whole sign house system and based on your rising sign, because we'll look at horoscopes for all 12 rising signs, but some of us might not know what that means. If you're new to the channel, we'll go ahead and I'll explain that here in a second. The last thing that I want to mention before we get into the horoscopes, though, is that over the next year, as Jupiter is traveling through Gemini, arguably the biggest contact that Jupiter has is going to be Jupiter's upcoming square to Saturn in Pisces. And through a series of Jupiter going retrograde and then tracking back over zodiacal degrees, Jupiter will actually go through a Saturn square 3 times over the course of the next year, which I think is arguably going to be what you could summarize about, well, what does it mean that Jupiter is in this sign? Or what does it mean personally that Jupiter is now transiting through this whole sign house in my birth chart? I think it's going to have a lot to do with the square that it makes to Saturn. And so what we're going to do is we're simply going to boil it down to a few easy to understand concepts. We're going to look at your rising sign, and we're going to see where and what house is Jupiter now in. And that square that Jupiter will make back to Saturn in the Pisces house, we're going to say, okay, Jupiter might have some blessing that it is trying to bestow upon those particular house topics in that Gemini house. But the square to Saturn in the Pisces house might simultaneously represent a kind of struggle, let's say, since Saturn is typically a planet that brings challenge, difficulties, hard work, etc., right? So we're going to summarize and boil it down to blessing that is tied in with or related to maybe struggle, or blessing that happens alongside of struggle over here. So that's how we're going to delineate these horoscopes today, is blessing in this part that is beginning to grow, Jupiter moving into this new area in the birth chart that will eventually come to relate or square Saturn kind of struggle. Now, struggle is kind of a heavy word, and Saturn's a heavy planet. So I don't want to scare anybody out there and say, oh my God, this means you're going to have the struggle of your life and it's going to be nothing but bad. I don't think that's the case with this. I think that struggle insofar as we all have to struggle to keep on surviving. We all have to do something to live. And that doesn't always mean that we're having a bad time. That doesn't always mean that we wish it weren't so. So you'll see that as we go on. But struggle, it just is a word that is saying this is real. This is the place in our lives that we're tending to have to take the hammer and really whack on that nail. And it may be challenging. It may be difficult. It doesn't mean we won't get through it. It doesn't mean it's all bad. It doesn't mean that we're, in a puddle of tears, although it could. But it just means that that's where there's a lot of work, a lot of hard, duty, discipline, seriousness that is really us kind of struggling against something. Whereas the Jupiter house, the Gemini Jupiter house in our birth chart, might be the area where things come easier. Blessings are bestowed upon us from the heavens. Things are raining down and it's like, it's just like, wow, this is wonderful. Jupiter tends to have connections with things like that. So that's how we're going to delineate these horoscopes for all 12 rising signs today. Quickly, before we get into it, I do want to go ahead and pull up the real-time chart for you guys and make sure that everybody knows what I'm talking about for rising signs. So because I'm a traditional Hellenistic Western astrologer, I'm using whole sign houses. Now, I know a lot of us probably are used to seeing our birth chart in Placidus or, Coke or something like that. But, and I started out using those house systems as well. I used the Placidus house system for like 15 years when I first began learning astrology. But when I began to explore and formally learn Hellenistic, traditional, ancient astrology, because ancient astrologers were, for the most part, using a whole sign house system. It became one benefit of that kind of house system is that it's easy to understand a planet in a sign because that whole sign is a whole house in your birth chart. So, for instance, if you want to know, okay, whole sign house systems, what does that mean? For me in my birth chart, if I'm used to seeing it in a different house system, all you have to do is locate the ascendant degree and whatever sign that ascendant degree is in, whether that's 0 degrees of that sign or that's 29 degrees of that sign, anywhere in that sign. So for instance, in this example chart here, if you have, let's say this was your birth chart, and you have the ascendant at 23 degrees and 45 minutes in the sign of Aries, that entire sign of Aries then becomes your first whole house. And then it's really easy to understand from that point that the second house is the entire next whole sign of Taurus. The third house is the entire next whole sign of Gemini. So for instance, when we go into horoscopes here in a second, we are going to be looking at, okay, Jupiter has now entered the third whole sign house. And that means that third house topics are then going to be the thing that we talk about. Saturn is back in the 12th whole sign house in the sign of Pisces. So we're going to combine, for instance, in this example, we're going to combine the struggle of the 12th that may have a relationship with the blessings of the third. And that's how we do that. So if you're unfamiliar with whole sign, just locate where the ascendant degree is. And that's how you can follow along with the horoscopes that we do today. And then, of course, I'll put timestamps so you can skip ahead to your rising sign. Now, one more thing before we get into it is that let's just begin to flesh out Jupiter in Gemini archetypal narratives or themes. What is Jupiter in Gemini like? Well, from a dignity standpoint, let's do this. Let's pull up the real-time clock again. Okay, so one thing that you'll notice is that from the dignity standpoint of ancient astrology, Jupiter's home, his home temple or his home sign is Sagittarius, right? That's the sign that Jupiter is said to rule or is said to be at home in or something like that. And Jupiter, of course, has two of those places in the zodiac. One of them is Sagittarius and one of them is in Pisces. So one thing that is very interesting is that when you want to interpret what is Jupiter in Gemini like, well, one thing is that Jupiter is now in Gemini in a sign that feels very opposite to its own natural signification. So Jupiter we tend to think of as hopeful, as good, benefic, maybe bringing things together, maybe being broad-minded or philosophical. So how does Jupiter express in a Mercury-ruled sign like Gemini? Well, one of the things is that from the dignity standpoint of ancient astrology, we're taught that when planets are in opposite signs of one of their own ruling signs or their own home signs, you get kind of like the fish out of water in detriment kind of delineation that you can make for that. I'll give you a real life example of this. When I was doing some research on Jupiter and Gemini, I came across a lot of celebrities that had this natally. When they were born, Jupiter was in this sign. There were so many that I couldn't even, it was overwhelming. Everybody from Clint Eastwood to Jerry Seinfeld to Ben Stiller. And, when you think about Clint Eastwood and Ben Stiller, those two people are nothing alike, right? Eastwood's very, very serious, and Stiller is kind of a goofball, right? But one thing that I noticed is that Ben Stiller was born with Jupiter on that ascending degree in his first house. So what that means is because the first house is a house that is descriptive of your personality, your character, your identity. It's very tied in with who you are as a character that you play in the world or in your life. It's interesting that Ben Stiller, having Jupiter right on that ascendant degree, acts like a trumpet that is blasting out this Jupiter in Gemini archetypal characteristic. And for a person that plays characters for a living, his job is to be characters. Now, of course, when Stiller was starting out, before he was a big star, he was probably playing characters that he was told to play by the director or whatever was written in the script or whatever. He was, he just had to be those characters. But even then, you still would have seen this Jupiter in Gemini coming through very strongly in that character role that he would develop. But now that he is a very big star, he doesn't have to play characters that don't resonate with him personally. And when he comes up with those characters, or he envisions those characters, it's very personal for him. And I think he's able to exemplify Jupiter and Gemini probably better than anybody you could come up with an example for in a birth chart, because it's right on his ascendant. So he is trumpeting this archetypal characteristic very, very purely. And I think that you could look to the kinds of character roles that he plays in movies to get a really good feel for Jupiter and Gemini. For instance, in many of his roles are characterized by a character that finds himself out of place in many ways, right? Something about Mary. He is chasing a girl that is, existentially outside of his league, that everybody wants, right? She's very high sexual SMV. He's not like the quarterback, the popular guy. He's very nerdy. He doesn't have a lot going for him, and he has huge competition, but he still, can't help find himself in these weird out of place situations that almost like he has no choice. He's like being pulled along to want to chase her. Even when he tries to give up chasing her, he still finds himself living this life where he's back chasing her, right? He's this very out of sorts, out of place kind of character. Again, Jupiter in an opposite sign. It's very far away from its natural home, where it feels like it can be itself. Jupiter does not feel like it can be itself in the sign of Gemini. Not to say that it's all bad. There are many good things about Jupiter and Gemini. Both Mercury and Jupiter are love to learn. They both like to have wisdom or knowledge or truth. They both really like to understand things in deep ways. That's one thing where they sort of they share territory. But the dignity interpretation of Jupiter in an opposite sign, you really get the essence of a lot of Stiller's characters, I think. The one that's really interesting, for example, is The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, where here is this person that lives this life where, again, he's sort of out of place. He doesn't really belong where he is. He doesn't even belong in his own skin, so to speak. He has this imaginal world that he lives in, and the plot line of what is the character plot line is him moving from this imaginal daydreamy place, where he slowly begins to make these daydreams a reality. And so there's this whole trajectory that he goes on to sort of move to a place where he does belong. He doesn't belong in this boring, doldrum office life that has no meaning, right? He's finding meaning through experiences that are visceral, that match his inner world. That's very Jupiter and Gemini. So I just wanted to give you like a quick feel for what this is like. Now, before we get too much more long-winded here, let's go ahead and jump into some horoscopes. So again, we are going to look at this from the standpoint of struggle for the Pisces house and blessing for the Gemini house. And I'll go ahead and pull up the real-time clock here. And we'll put Aries on the ascendant here. Now, I am just doing this real quick. Okay, so if you are an Aries rising, we have Jupiter now in the 3rd house out of the 2nd house, and we have Saturn in the 12th house. So struggle in the 12th house that eventually makes a connection with blessing in the 3rd. So topics that come to mind are something like Jupiter may be growing or developing the blessings of our everyday environment, the kind of the comings and goings, the regular people that we see, the regular relationships, siblings, the rituals or habits or the culture that we are connected with or the culture that we came from, something about that area, those areas of life may be going through a process of development in a really positive, beneficial way, where simultaneously, as this square begins to perfect over the next year a couple of times with Saturn, it may be that the ways that we trip ourselves up with our habitual blind spots, like things that we do to shoot ourselves in the foot, or people that work against us or don't like us, or just general misfortune or isolation, anything that feels like it's working against you, you working against you, and alongside potential health challenges that you may have to overcome, or a kind of, the 12th house was said to be the place of bad spirit. And it was also a place that was struggling to get back to the first house and become individuated. So there's this struggle towards becoming who you are as a person with Saturn in the 12th. But then there is this simultaneous interesting blessing that may be happening with the everyday people around you, or the family around you, or the home environment, something about maybe the learning that is going to be almost like developing in a really big way. That those third house kinds of things are where the blessings come in. And so it sounds like what it is, it's like there are good things happening around you, but there's still the struggle to be totally yourself in a healthy way, or be who you are in a liberated way. And so I think the theme of sort of liberation in a very practical, everyday, mental kind of like almost like the Walter Mitty example, where it's like, how do you get to, it's very much like the Walter Mitty example. How do you get to yourself and live that identity every day? That's really kind of where I feel like the blessing and struggle dynamic is playing out if you are in Aries rising. So I'm just doing these really quickly to give you an example of this, but play with the 12th house struggle, third house blessing motif here, and you might be able to see how this is fitting in your life. Now let's go ahead and we'll put Taurus on the ascendant here, and we'll roll the real-time clock forward. There is Taurus in the ascendant. Now this is bringing Jupiter out of your first house into your second. And then we have Saturn still hanging out in the 11th house. So the struggle is maybe with those 11th house areas of life, like say friends or groups or associations that you belong with. Maybe it might even be something like if you have like a political associations, like what would be an example? Like if you go to church, or if you belong to an activist group, or anything along those lines. The area of life that tends to involve groups of people or associations of people that we belong to, as well as maybe goals or aspirations, that's where the struggle is coming in. But then simultaneously, we may have some new growth or development around our finances, right? Jupiter in the second, maybe investments are coming along now that have a really positive impact on what we can save or what we can earn or something like that. So it might be something like, well, I don't have time for friends because there are these really good things that are happening for me financially right now. Something like that, I feel like, is sort of the dynamic at play if you're a Taurus rising. And not only that, but that would be like Saturn in the 11th would be like, God, I wish I had time for friends, like maybe I feel lonely or isolated, like I don't feel like I can connect to my friends, or I don't feel like I had time for them. And it's kind of sucks, because I want to just hang out, have fun. But there is so much positive stuff developing for me financially, or in terms of how I make my life secure or something like that. So that's sort of the quick uh, delineation that I would say might be at play if you're a Taurus rising. Okay, let's go ahead now and we'll move the real-time clock and put Gemini on the ascendant here. If you are a Gemini rising, this is a big one because we have Jupiter entering the first whole sign house, which is very existential. Jupiter in your first whole sign house is the house of self. It's the house of physical body. It's the house of identity. How do we identify? Who do we identify as? Like the Ben Stiller example. Um, who are we? What character do we play in the world? How do we show up in the world? This is all the kind of thing that is begin to develop, I think, in a positive way for Jupiter now in this place in your birth chart, that is simultaneously having some kind of connection to Saturn in Pisces. As the square goes through the 3 times that Jupiter and Saturn square from these 2 places in the birth chart, it's like, well, for me personally, there is really good things happening there. I'm developing as a person. I'm gaining wisdom as who I am, but somehow or another, it may mean that with Saturn in the 10th, I need to pull back from work. I can't work so much, or I can't be the projects or the things that I'm involved with that are about me being active daily and getting stuff done. Maybe there's a struggle there. It doesn't feel like that's working, or it doesn't feel like that's the thing that needs to happen, or there's some way in which you're pulling back from that because there is more positive growth perhaps happening on you personally or inside with your body. Like, for instance, I need to work less so I can focus on my health and exercise, or maybe I'm taking up a new discipline or something like that. One potential negative to this is something like I'm becoming unhealthy as a person. Now, this is Jupiter and Gemini as kind of like Jupiter having the effect of indulgence in the sphere of physical health. Like I'm enjoying myself too much. I'm becoming somebody that it somehow only cares about my own personal happiness all the time, and somehow that maybe conflicts with the thing that I'm trying to do in the world for work or career or something like that. So there can be a little bit of this tension between those 2 places because maybe there is an over concern for personal happiness. And of course, that's personal happiness is very important, but it has to be balanced with duty and responsibility, right? So that's one potential shadow of this. But another example could probably the concrete thing that you would say with this, of course, is just going to be like pregnancy. Jupiter in the first house could mean that your body is getting bigger. If you're a woman, of course, getting pregnant is like all of a sudden over the next 9 months, you're getting bigger because you're pregnant. And maybe the pregnancy is like, well, I need to take maternity leave. So there's the limitation in the 10th house, career place, right, with Saturn. So it could be a few things that are having to do with those particular house topics. Okay, now let's go ahead and roll the real-time clock forward to Cancer rising. This is going to place Jupiter now having moved into the 12th house and Saturn in the 9th. So this is the square dynamic between these 2 planets. That's where that is taking place, from these 12th house areas of life to these 9th house areas of life. Now, both the 9th house and the 12th house they're kind of this place where there's less activity, or it's not such a direct place that the rubber is hitting the road. The 9th house tends to be a place where there's a lot of philosophical development, or there's a lot of meditation or contemplation on things. The 12th house tends to be a place where it's like in our blind spot or in our shadows. One thing for Cancer rising, having Jupiter in the 12th might mean I feel like this could go one of two ways. I feel like Jupiter in the 12th could say, I'm making real progress. The blessing is that I'm finally overcoming something that was a health challenge, something that was a bad habit, like a recovery of some kind is taking place, and you're making successful headway in recovering or recovering from something that has been a health challenge or an addiction or a bad habit or bad mental habits, ways that you shoot yourself in the foot. But the second way could also appear here with Jupiter in Gemini. It could be like, I'm much more, I say things that get me into trouble a lot more. I'm less, I don't self-censor, and I don't think you should self-censor, but this is like the obvious thing, like really saying something that could lead to somebody really, not liking you because you're just being like, you're just joking around, that kind of thing. You're being jovial, but it may have the effect of like, I didn't realize that joke was going to be taken so badly by the other person, and it really caused a riff or something like that. Is one of the pitfalls of Jupiter and Gemini in the 12th, I feel like. The struggle is with the 9th house, and the 9th house can have anything to do with everything from traveling to religion to just understanding who we are on a philosophical higher level. So there could be this interesting, almost like behind the scenes or like subconscious process over the next year that is about us learning how to work with the shadow sides of ourselves in a positive way that may need us to really put in some hard work into our morality, understanding our own ethics or codes of righteousness or something, or developing wisdom. But the wisdom comes through formal education that is challenging or difficult, or reading difficult spiritual texts, or something like, or maybe you're like literally traveling in places that you don't want to be. You feel like you wish you could be home, but you're not. You're, for some reason or another, you feel like you're meant to be somewhere in parts unknown or in strange lands or something like that. But for Cancer rising, it may fall into a few of these different examples like this, where there is something about the struggle of philosophy or ethics or morality or meaning that is related to the positive developmental growth around how do we overcome things that tend to shut us out, bad habits, things that we say that hurt others that we don't realize are going to hurt others, maybe health challenges that we need to really work at to get back to ourselves. Something in that realm, I think, could be what this is speaking to if you are a Cancer rising. Now, let's go ahead and roll the real-time clock forward, and we'll put Leo on the ascendant here. I'm trying to go through these just somewhat briefly here, so this video isn't too long. Okay, if you're a Leo rising, if the ascendant degree is falling in the sign of Leo in your birth chart, this is going to place Jupiter now in Gemini in the 11th. So Jupiter moved out of your 10th house of career into your 11th house of good spirit, as it was called in ancient astrology. Saturn still in the 8th house. This is interesting. This, I feel, has a connection with, this is a very social dynamic for this particular square between Jupiter and Saturn that will be developing over the course of the year a couple of times. And you get a sense of like growth or development in a positive way around friendships, around groups or associations that you belong to, that somehow is connected to a struggle of the resources that are coming along with those friendships or relationships, or maybe even the esteem meaning like you have a growing group of friends, but um, you have to overcome adversity in terms of what everybody thinks of you, and what will people say about you? How will they recommend you or not recommend you? Maybe it's hard to get a good recommendation, but then at the same time, you're expanding your network or something like that. Of course, it could be more financial, like, well, there are, I'm getting, benefactors are coming to me. There might be somebody that's coming in that really has the means and is going to help you out, but you're very obligated to the debt that it is coming along with. So for instance, like, let's say, all of a sudden there is like a grandpa that says, well, I really want you to succeed at this business, and I've got all this money and I'm getting old, and uh let's start your business, and I'm going to fund it. And it feels like there's this blessing that is coming from a benefactor, coming from almost like a guardian angel, or there's like something really good happening, from a friend or something like that. But it feels like it has this very financial obligation that is going to be about, um, can you pay for it? Or if you accept the help from a friend, what is it costing you in the long run? Can you afford it? Can you pay it back if you take that loan? Something like that. The 11th house was traditionally associated with the wealth of the king. So like almost like the king's assets, right? Or like the government's assets. So getting a loan from a government, but then finding out later that it's like, ooh, you're on the hook, and that might be a real struggle to pay that money back, right? Something along those lines. I feel like it has this blessing of like really good things are coming for the things that I aspire to do in life. If it's this dream of a business, or this dream of a career, or this dream of establishing a practice or studio, or that is involving other people and friends or whatever. But the heavy cost of that, or the burden of that financial responsibility that is tied in with shared resources from banks or institutions or loans, anything like that. You want to watch out for it. Can you afford it? Basically, I think is what the maybe the bottom line message is with that. So that is what I see for Leo rising. If you have Leo on the ascendant, and these two houses now coming in with this square that's going to be activated over the next year. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll put Virgo on the ascendant, and this is going to place Jupiter in the 10th house if you're a Virgo rising, and then we still have Saturn hanging out in the 7th house. So these are both angular houses, and we're going to take this theme of like, okay, maybe there are the growth blessings that are happening in the public sphere of career, or of everyday work that we do, or action that we're doing out in the world, that is somehow potentially related to the square that will form to Saturn in the 7th. Relationships, marriage, partnership, maybe even like romantic sexual partners or something like that, or business partners. So for instance, somehow my career is really blossoming and blooming at this time, but I don't have time for a spouse. Or my career is blossoming and blooming, but my business partner, there's a tension with my business partner where somehow there's money, or the development is happening for me, but there's tension or conflict with the business partner that I'm involved with, or like maybe even a competitor in the office, or maybe even, something like that. Like I get the promotion, but now Joe Blow, who thought he was getting it, is competing against me, and I'm struggling against this, going into the office every day and having to sort of struggle against dynamics in the office with other people because good things are happening to me, or I'm having a lot of successful development in my career, but I have no time for a relationship, no time for love, no time for a marriage, and the marriage is suffering, or something like that is kind of the dynamic that I see for Virgo rising. So if you're Virgo rising, it could fall into those two places. Just think the blessing coming in the 10th house area of your life, and maybe the struggle happening in the marriage or relationships or something like that. Now, this is one of those ones where I don't want to scare you. I'm not saying that if you're married, you're going to get divorced and it's going to be a struggle. But we all know that relationships go through periods of easiness and periods where it takes more work. So the struggle, again, that word sounds really scary, but I just mean struggle in terms of that's where it doesn't come easy. There's work that has to be put into it. So don't worry. I don't mean to make you feel like if you're a Virgo rising, you're going to lose everything that you have with your spouse or something like that. But the blessing, the rain that comes down from heaven that seemingly is just like this blessing falling upon you, things are easier in that area of life. And the duty, the work, the challenge, the blood, sweat, and tears has to be put into that other area a little, more. So anyway, okay. Now let's go ahead and we'll move Libra to the ascendant. If you're a Libra rising, this is going to place Jupiter now in the 9th house, and Jupiter will eventually go through a square with Saturn hanging out in the 6th house. So we have these 9th house, 6th house kind of dynamics that are, you could say, from the theme of like the blessings are coming into the 9th house area of life, and maybe that struggle or hard work, the devotion, the blood, sweat, and tears is really happening in the 6th house area of life. So for me, that sounds very much like over the course of the next year that there's going to be positive development around your ethical, moral understanding of life. Just when Jupiter in the 9th house is happening in your birth chart, it's something like, it could be something concrete, like I go back to university and I'm learning something, right? Or I'm now a legal assistant and I'm having a lot of success learning the law. Could be concrete things, but even with concrete examples, they go back to more spiritual places within us. So you might be getting more education, higher education, as the 9th house was associated with, but it will, on the inner landscapes, have an important impact that is about, I have a positive development around the broader meaning of my life, on that, in that kind of way. So at the heart, I feel like, yeah, you can make all kinds of concrete guesses. Jupiter in the 9th. Are you traveling? Are you going back to school? Are you aligning with a religion or spiritual path that is, an important thing right now? Any one of those could be something we see with Jupiter in the 9th. But are you moving to a foreign land or something, but you don't feel totally like you belong there? Jupiter in a opposite sign to Sagittarius. But again, at the heart, Jupiter is having signifying positive development around higher understanding on some level that is broadening things that you didn't know before. So that's the positive end of the spectrum. And then somehow the difficult thing or the struggle comes with the drudgery of labor. So think about, where in your life do you labor? Where is the real, like, just head down grind happening? That is in Pisces. So for instance, it could be that there's spiritual development happening, but the challenge is to do that while also going to work every day, and maybe you just hate your job or something like that. I want to be fulfilled spiritually. I want to develop this higher spiritual calling. I want to connect with God in a bigger way, or whatever God is to you in a bigger way. I want to travel, see the world. I want to expand my horizons, but I'm duty bound to do this labor every day, this job, this thing that I'm involved in, the farming of the everyday life, the out there with the hoe, just raking the rocks. Even though I'd love to see a new place, and maybe I will, but there's a tension back and forth between these two areas. So interesting if you're a Libra rising. Okay, now let's go ahead and we'll put Scorpio on the ascendant, my own personal rising sign. And if you are a Scorpio rising, Jupiter now in your 8th house, a place that was connected with the finances of a spouse or of other people, or inheritance, like a what do you call it? Yeah, like an inheritance. And then you have Saturn hanging out in the 5th, and eventually Jupiter and Saturn will form that square, and there will be maybe the blessings of the 8th house area of life that is coming along with maybe the struggle happening in the 5th. So right off the bat, it feels as though it's something like, well, there's money there from other people, from institutions, from loans. Maybe there's an inheritance that comes along. There's something positively available as a resource, even if it's not like a physical resource. It could be the good opinions of other people. Like other people will talk about you to other people in a really positive light while Jupiter is in Gemini, and say, oh yeah, that Eden, he's really funny at parties. Like you definitely want to go over to his house and have a hot pot, right? It's like something I did the other night with friends. The good esteem or the benefits from others is there. Maybe spouse getting a promotion or a raise and having more money. But then challenge in the 5th, children, creativity, recreation, having fun, playing sports. How do those two things align up? It feels like the duty of children, or the struggle of having to create something, coming along with the blessings of resources that are available, that are connected with other people, family, banks, loans, is all theirs. So it may be that you, I don't know. Okay, like one example could be just, for example, for me personally, let's say that my YouTube channel grows, and so I'm becoming more esteemed as like a content provider, and maybe that is representing Jupiter in Gemini. And there's like this growth in a positive way around around the resources that come along with the content made on the channel, or the astrology readings that I'm giving, or something like that. Word of mouth is spreading. So I'm getting money from other people, exchanging for readings or something like that, right? But the workload of constantly having to create the content is the rub. That's the hard part, that is sort of the challenge. Something along those lines could be what we're looking at. So if you create something, and your creation somehow is tied in with financial resources, especially as it pertains from other people or with other people, it could be the struggle to continue to produce. One example would be like for like a famous musician, where everybody would say, I really, I love your music, but when in the hell are you going to come out with another album? And you find yourself like going, oh God, I need it. Where's the inspiration? I need the songs. I need them to come, something like that. So Now, of course, you have potential things like debt and spending too much money doing something recreational that you love to do, like um, wanting to do anything for your own pleasure, and how that may be growing your debt, because the eighth house is usually a negative place. So one thing you have to watch out for is having the debt grow too much, because of your serious attachment to doing your hobbies or what you love or having fun or something like that. That's also something that is a potential um, thing to watch out for if you're a Scorpio rising. Okay, let's go ahead now and we'll move to Sagittarius rising and put Sagittarius on the ascendant. This is going to move Jupiter into the seventh house now. Jupiter now entering a different house, the place that was said to be associated with marriage partners or business partners, travel, um, even competitors, things like that. Now, as Saturn travels through the seventh house over the next year, it's going to be making squares to Saturn in the fourth house. So if you're a Sagittarius rising, you get something like, good things happening to my partner. My partner is having a lot of positive growth and development for him in his life somewhere. But for me, the struggle is at home. I'm at home, or something about the home life or the house or things like that. That's where the hard work, the struggle, the effort, the drudgery, or the place that I feel isolated or lonely. It's like that. The home or the family, potentially the parents or the property, that's where the difficult struggle area is happening as the square performs with Jupiter over the next year a couple of times. And it may have something to do with the fact that, like, maybe partner is doing awesome at work, and so you have to move, but you hate where you live, or something like that, I think. So I'm just going to keep it simple. These are two angular houses, so take the topics of the blessings developing somewhere in a marriage, in a partnership, in a relationship, maybe even in competition, maybe even in legal matters or something like that, but then say that somehow that could be connecting to the difficulties at home with parents, with family, with where you live, all of that, maybe being away from home because you're traveling or something along those lines. Fourth house, seventh house kinds of dynamics is at play if you are a Sagittarius rising. Okay, now let's go ahead and we'll put Capricorn on the ascendant. So if you're a Capricorn rising, Jupiter has now entered your sixth house. And as Jupiter travels through this house, will move to form squares with Saturn in the third house. This is a pretty interesting one. This is the sixth house was known as a place of well, they called it bad fortune. So to have a planet of good fortune moving into a house of bad fortune feels like a couple of things. It's either, I feel like, there's a recovery, there is real growth and development around the hard work that you put into your health, or the hard work that you put into a business that takes a lot of work, or a hard work that's positive growth or development that is coming along as a blessing in an area where you labor, where it takes a lot of effort and work. That maybe is something you're building, or something about your body that is coming along and developing in a positive way. And then the square that relates to third house topics may be at the expense of the everyday environment, the family members that are around you, or the people around you, potentially at the cost of the obligations or duties that you have to the regular rituals, So for instance, um, maybe spending a lot of time at work and less time connecting with friends, family, relatives, even being at home. Um, Maybe the hard work that goes into having to learn something like as a discipline that helps you in your work. But you're getting those third house, everyday environmental things that is where the struggle is happening, that is somehow connected to the area of life that you are already building something with a lot of effort, with a lot of steam. One thing that you see is that there could almost be like this religious zeal towards health at this time, where you really want to develop the wisdom and the practice of doing something like a martial arts, or like something that is really geared towards you having strong warrior kind of development around your physical body, or something that you're very protective about. It could even be about a cause that you fight for, or like the liberation of those that are oppressed, that you feel like is like almost like a moral duty, or like an ethical cause that you belong to, but that somehow is at the expense of the real mundane everyday environment that maybe is surrounding the home or the regular people in your life. That's where the tension is coming through. And I'll admit this one is a bit more abstract. So I'm going to leave it as um, potential positive blessings coming in with the place that is a place of duty, hard work, maybe recovery, maybe development around body, um, or advocacy for a particular cause, or maybe just the regular things that have to do with the job or the career. Positive things around that. Maybe positive things happening with employees, or tenants if you own properties, that simultaneously come along with things more difficult at the root, which is, I know, kind of broad. So forgive me. This one for me, Capricorn, is kind of abstract, and both of these houses can sometimes be difficult to delineate for. So if you are a Capricorn rising, help me out with this one in the comments. Let me know if any of that makes sense. If you get the Saturn in the third, what that could be about. Now, Saturn's been in the third for a while, so you should probably already have noticed those things. But now Jupiter moving into the sixth, maybe there's some positive growth around simply the thing that you've been really working hard on for a while. That could be something that is evident as time goes on. I get like somebody that loves to go to the gym, and all of a sudden there's like muscular gains, you know? I also get potentially something like maybe on a negative side, bad habits that are coming along that are detrimental to your body because of like gratification, or like if you're if you love to, like somebody that would I'm trying to find the right way to say this that's like not offensive, but let's just say somebody that would have like reckless sex, somebody that would have uh, abuse problems around substances or anything. It could be I abuse social media, I'm on there too much, or something like that. The downside of Jupiter in the sixth house is that there could be growth that blows up things that are kind of detrimental to you, especially if it has to do with pleasure or gratification or something along those lines. And maybe there is Saturn in the fifth, Saturn in the third, speaking to that. That brings challenge or difficulty to how you function on an everyday level. So that's one thing. So this could be one of the more challenging rising signs to understand this one, and also maybe a little more challenging in terms of dealing with this energy. So let me know if you're a Capricorn rising, what you think about this. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and put Aquarius on the ascendant. If you are an Aquarius rising, this is going to place Jupiter now moved into Gemini into a new house. This is going to be the 5th house, out of the 4th into the 5th if you're an Aquarius rising. I love this. This is, first of all, Jupiter in the 5th makes me think of fun. It makes me think of joy, the expansion of pleasure, joy, sports, recreation, creativity, maybe children perhaps. But how does that connect with Saturn in the 2nd? Well, the obvious thing is that somehow or another, the resources are maybe hit a bit hard because of all of the fun or pleasure or romance or creativity, the hobbies that you want to do cost a lot of money. You know, something very simple like that, I think, is what we're getting at. So this one, I'm going to keep it really short because I don't see the need to overcomplicate it. Children that come along, it's like, what a blessing. You know, we're going to have another baby and we're going to have another child to add to the family, but a lot to pay for. That means strain on the budget, that kind of thing. So I would look for, where is the budget strained? And is that strain somehow related to 5th house kinds of things, like children that you have to pay for, children going off to college, or hobbies that you love, like as an example, right now, I really, really, really want to try my hand at brewing beer, but Kate has emphatically said, no, we're building the house. We've got a baby. You have way too much on your plate to be taking on a new hobby. So even though I really, really, really want to do this, I want to try it, I get very excited about the equipment, and they have a lot of advances in beer brewing equipment. And this is just how I've been like this my whole life. I've moved from one hobby to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And oftentimes those come at huge price tags when I have to get all the equipment I need for the new thing that I want to try. So just kind of an example of that. Okay, now let's go ahead and we are going to put Pisces on the ascendant now. So if your ascendant degree is falling anywhere in the sign of Pisces, we're going to see now that Jupiter has moved into the 4th house, out of the 3rd house into the 4th. And as Jupiter travels through the 4th house over the course of the next year, Jupiter will make squares to Saturn in the 1st. This is a really interesting one, because we're bringing in the house topics of the blessing that comes to the home, the family, maybe with the parents, maybe even the wealth of property that we own. There's some kind of blessing that is really happening at the root, at the base. Our support, the things that support us in an everyday world, our family, all of that stuff is like going through this period of like, wow, there's a lot of positive growth at home or in the family. Simultaneous to that, or related to that potentially, is that there is Saturn in the 1st, which may be, it's difficult for us to relate to ourselves. It's difficult for us to be who we are around other people, or to feel like we can just be ourselves around other people. Did I just say the same thing? Perhaps. Saturn in the 1st, you get the sense that there's this disconnected angst around identity, around being who you are, or being able to express your personality with those, with other people, or maybe even just general discomfort around, I'm not sure I am who I want to be. And it takes a lot of work to get there. That's where the struggle is this very existential, I want to develop who I'm going to be. But simultaneous to that, maybe the hard work that you put into yourself is having a positive benefit on the home or in the family. Maybe there is a lot of self-sacrifice where you are putting yourself on the back burner, um, because there is real opportunity at home, and you put yourself last in order to show up for that, for those positive things in the home, the children, the husband, the family, the property, so on and so forth. So, or maybe with the father or something like that. So it has something to do with the existentialness of the first house, identity, personality, putting yourself last, things like that, that simultaneously may have a connection with real positive development having to do with home, family, property development, um, maybe growing wisdom around your heritage. I knew somebody that was well, okay, I won't explain this whole example, but um, this is a very specific example. But somebody that I know that is Pisces rising, that um, I could see them going through a period of exploring their heritage, like their ancestral lands or ancestral heritage in some way. But then feeling like, well, because I've learned something about my ancestry and there's somehow some really positive connection to that, this changes who I thought I was. And it doesn't match. There's tension there. I'm, like I've always thought of myself as a person that is is like a city person, and what is the term, I feel very connected with the metropolitan identity, right? But I've recently discovered that on my father's side of the family, we've been long time farmers, and my heritage goes back to this really interesting tradition of like farming or something like that. And I don't fit that identity. I don't know how to reconcile those two identities together, but it's part of my heritage. And even though it's a positive development, how do I see myself into that? How do I see myself into the family that there's a positive development around? How do I see that? How do I see myself into the positive thing that is happening at the base or at the roots with heritage, with father? Those are the kinds of things that may be coming up. So interesting. So let me know if you're Pisces rising, maybe how you see that coming in. I would love to read some comments about that if you're Pisces rising. Okay, guys. Well, thanks for sticking with me. This has been a little bit longer of a video, but hopefully this has been useful for you guys and made sense. If you have any questions, drop them in the comment section, and I'll be back again next Monday with another Mantic Monday episode, and we will probably take a look at Venus's conjunction with the sun, also in the sign of Gemini, something that has been happening for a while and is going to be perfecting at the beginning of next week. So hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you later. Bye for now.